Muy bien. La siguiente pregunta, allá, por favor.
Sí, buenas tardes. 3 preguntas. Primero, ¿comparto utilidades con la comunidad? Segundo, si soy parte de la comunidad, ¿soy parte también dueño de la tecnología? Y si eso me permite a mí llevar esa tecnología y crear un producto similar o diferente o explorarlo como yo quiera.
Yeah. Another good question. So again, the community creates the software, and we don't charge for the software. We give that away. All of it is released under the GPL, and anybody else, it's released for allowing for commercial use. So anybody can take our software, or our hardware designs for that matter, and make their own version for free, no royalty required. They can make derivative designs, they can change it, or they can just copy it. And that's absolutely fine. We encourage that. In terms of sharing the profits, again, we sell the hardware, and we tend to develop the hardware ourselves. We give away the software that the community develops. Now, obviously, the hardware is not of any good without the software. So in some cases where some community members have really made a huge effort in creating the software, we've offered to pay them a royalty, and every now and then we do pay royalties, but by and large, they don't want a royalty, and I'll give you an example why. Let's say that 10 people contributed to the firmware for some particular autopilot, and you say, okay, we'd like to give you a royalty of $1 per autopilot. And they say, terrific. And they said, well, what would that mean? And I said, well, what we'll do is we'll raise the price of the autopilot by $10 to cover your royalty. And they're like, well, but we don't want that because then fewer people will use it. That's not why we did this. We all have day jobs. We didn't do it for $100 or $200 or $1,000. We did it to change the world. We want to create something that's going to have a broad impact and be adopted by lots of people. The higher the price, the smaller the market. And so by and large, their incentives have been social incentives. They did it for the participation, for the, for the reputation, for being part of a project they believe in. They did it to get something out there. And the more royalties come into it, the less impact that product will have. So by and large, people don't want to be paid. Also, the money is trivial compared to what they make in their day job. But over time, if people do decide they want to be paid, we're happy to do it. It just hasn't really been an issue to date.
¿Dónde está el micrófono ahorita? Adelante, por favor.
Hello, hello. Okay. Primero que nada, pues muchas gracias se me hace que súper interesante que hayan traído a Chris para que diera esta plática. Yo creo que lo mismo que he visto desde el panel de la mañana, es más bien como un comentario rápido. El comentario de la mañana del panel de Radio Global y de todas las demás personas, aparte de Sani y con Chris, lo que me estoy dando cuenta, y ojalá haga eco fuerte a través de la Secretaría de Educación Pública y de toda la gente que tiene control sobre todas estas cosas, es de que son personas que se guiaron en emociones. O sea, realmente lo hicieron porque tienen un sentido súper emocional con lo que quieren hacer, no porque iba a haber una ventaja monetaria. Eso ya es automático de ser bueno o de querer hacer las cosas, pues. La mayoría de las instituciones públicas de enseñanza es: te voy a enseñar para que seas práctico, para que sirvas de algo, pues. Pero no es enseñarte para que realmente seas feliz haciendo lo que haces o tengas buenas emociones o conexión emocional con cosas que pueden ser como manufactura o cosas que son físicas, pues realmente no tienen nada que ver. Pero a mí se me hace muy bien esta plática y ojalá haga ese eco y realmente innove en ese aspecto, pues, con las instituciones que están educando a jóvenes desde primaria, kinder, secundaria, prepa y universidad, a tratar de hacer un nicho de educadores que se vayan hacia ese aspecto, pues, de tratar de hacer el estudiante que tenga una emoción conectada con lo que quiera hacer. Es todo.
Muy bien.
Thank you. Yeah, bravo.
¿Tenemos otra pregunta?
I should just say one thing, that many of our community members are amateurs. And the word amateur is a Latin word, comes from the Latin amore, which is love. They're driven by love, not money. The power of passion and curiosity and excitement is so much more important than money in these emerging communities. And the reason Jordi and I are in business together is because we're doing something we love first. The reason we turn it into a business is so that more people can participate.
Muy bien. ¿Fue todo? ¿Tenemos otra pregunta?
Thank you for being here. Both me and my son are fans of your magazine. And thinking about the border,
That's on there?
Yes, right here. Yeah. And thinking about the border wait times is a huge problem in border communities, not just in Tijuana. And you're referring to a current infrastructure project that looks at the border and tries to solve, but they're looking at the same ways. Trying to resolve the border wait times with infrastructure in the same types of ways they did it, 50 years ago. In looking at open collaboration, open sourcing, what would be some of the ideas that we could, go back to the government and recommend and about, thinking about the border?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and I have to admit that I'm something of a defeatist when it comes to government policies. I pretty much assume it's going to happen slowly, if ever. And so my policy is to route around it. So rather than waiting for governments to change the regulations, I find innovation methods that don't touch regulations. So as I say, we do our innovation online, on the internet. The internet doesn't know about borders. We're a virtual company, so we manufacture wherever. We have manufacturing in Thailand. So wherever it's easiest, it's like water. Water flows downhill. Water fills the holes wherever they are. Our community and our innovation processes flows to wherever it's easiest. Right now, it's easiest for us to have one manufacturing facility in San Diego that's doing components, maybe another manufacturing facility in Tijuana that's doing assembly because Tijuana is exempted from American regulation. We're not allowed to export the finished products in the United States because of export controls, but we can do that in Mexico. So in that case, the border is an advantage. We have a better regulatory environment in Mexico. And then we operate in Thailand for the same reason, that the regulatory environment is lower in Thailand. So because when you start on the web and you start virtual, and you have an international community, you can flow, everything flows to where it's easiest. And if the border gets better, that's great, but if it doesn't, we'll find a way to work around it. We're not expecting governments to move as quickly as we do.
Antes de continuar, quisiera preguntarle a mi director de producción, ¿tenemos tiempo para otra pregunta? Parece que sí. Si hay alguien que quiera hacer una pregunta, la última. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you.
Thank you. You just mentioned that the internet has no borders, but recently in one of your articles in the Wire magazine, you mentioned that the web is dead and that there's barriers going on in the internet. What do you think about that?
Thank you. I assumed someone was going to ask about that. Obviously a very provocative headline. The article was actually about a very specific kind of content, which is the marketplace for commercial content. And the marketplace for commercial content is increasingly going behind barriers. Sometimes they're commercial barriers, sometimes they're physical barriers, and that they're going off the web onto things like the iPad or apps and iPhones or even Facebook, a policy barrier. I would say that the web that I'm talking about here is the amateur web. It's is the web of community, of people. That web is open and is getting ever opener. That's my night job. My day job is commercial content, and we're increasingly seeing the economic incentive to bring it onto closed platforms, whether it's iPad apps or paywalls, for many of the reasons that Jenny talked about earlier, which is that obviously business goes to where it has scarcity. You go places where there are barriers to entry, where you can have sort of pricing power. And the 20th century media was all about monopolies. We had monopolies over printing plants and radio distribution and television distribution. And when you have a monopoly, that's great for the monopolist. You can make a lot of money, but it limits the variety of content. The web broke those monopolies, which was fantastic for culture. I mean, by the way, I don't want the web to be dead. I very much hope that I'm wrong about this. I very much hope this trend reverses. As a consumer, as a participant in culture, I want open. Everything I do aside from my day job is open. Creative Commons, GPL, everything's open. openness is good for culture, but openness is not always good for every business. And so what we're seeing is a business driver towards closing much of the commercial content web and moving it onto these platforms like apps where it's easier to charge. That's a very understandable trend, but it does have some cultural consequences. Much of what, like for example, just take something simple, Facebook. As Facebook grows, a Google search gives you less and less of the web. 3 years ago, a Google search would give you all the web. Today, it's all the web except for Facebook. And this is a concern. Suddenly we don't have one. We are seeing a fragmentation of the cultural marketplace for commercial reasons. And so I think that's a very worrying trend as a consumer. It's a very understandable trend as a business person. By day, I'm part of the problem. By night, I'm part of the solution. It's not hypocrisy. I used to be a physicist, and I say it's not hypocrisy. It's wave-particle duality. So you physicists will understand the joke. But yeah, fortunately, the web I'm talking about for innovation is not the commercial content web. It's the community web. It's the web people, and that web is getting more and more open every day. Thank you very much.